You know, I literally just realised something about this particular set of Christmas idents from 1988, the Partridge in a Pear Tree and such. And I mean literally just, as in minutes before I sat down to start work on this. And what I realised is this. Obviously it's based on the 12 Days of Christmas, but the accompanying trailers are actually structured as a countdown, going all the way from 12 drummers drumming and 11 pipers piping, all the way down to 1, as in BBC One, as in a partridge in a pear tree, which is where the ident ends up. So conceptually it all hangs together rather well. Unfortunately it doesn't really come across, as evidenced by the fact that it took me 31 years to figure this out. Which might be partly why this is one of the most easily forgotten Christmas looks that BBC One ever had. In the 20th century at least. Perhaps unsurprisingly, since they got rid of the globe and the idea of any kind of solid, non-conceptual symbol tying the channel together, they've struggled to put together anything that truly stays in the memory over the past couple of decades. Although there have been some. It doesn't help that these days these things are made by advertisers rather than the tech ops boys and the VT department and the presentation department. That sort of thing died with producer choice. So now BBC One's Christmas presentation tends to be made by the same slick, soulless, dead-eyed reptile men as do the Christmas adverts, and they're largely indistinguishable. The previous 2 years they went full-on John Lewis. This year, perhaps anticipating that for one reason or another it might be quite a depressing holiday season for much of the country, they've gone with more of a Marks and Spencer feel, a sort of random seasonal celebration.
What a year, eh, folks? All right, enough of that. Get me to Christmas already.
It's Christmas!
We don't have to eat rabbit food for breakfast anymore.
Gingerbread! Doesn't matter what time I wake up.
Uncle Tim's even agreed not to talk about politics for the whole day.
Less of us have been gobbled this year.
We haven't moved for 3 series.
I don't even know what day it is.
And I get to be a kid again.
It's okay. It's an advert rather than a trailer package, but that's just something you have to accept in this day and age. I do like the Disney-fied animation. In fact, I wish they'd made more of it and made it into more of an overarching theme. The idents themselves are cute, if deceptively cheap in places. This one's on such a maddening loop, it actually starts putting me in mind of one of the old early 80s mechanical revolving things. I mean, it even goes around in a circle. And there's the obligatory quiet one for before the news, of course. Which, in a potent illustration of precisely where we are as a species, this year became the first Christmas ident to introduce coverage of a general election, of which we shall never speak again. If nothing else, I do prefer this sort of faintly ironic wackiness to the tear-jerking John Lewisisms of last year, and in theory the year before that, although that time was actually pretty good. The end of oneness still can't come soon enough, of course. BBC Two, as expected, are going with the same Christmassy variations on their usual line of beauty motif as last year, which I suppose I can tolerate, how magnanimous of me, as long as they keep adding new ones to the rotation every time they bring them back. This year, along with last year's glamorous, cosy and magical, we have the reasonably named Festive, made of tinsel, which is actually Christmassier than the other 3 put together, but who's counting? That's right, I am. Channel 4 are doing nothing new, as also expected, although they do have an occasionally used blip third for this year's big kids' book adaptation, The Tiger Who Came to Tea, just in time for Judith Carr to have died 7 months ago. The undoubted winners, however, not just of Christmas but of the entire year in television presentation, rather surprisingly, are ITV. They finally got rid of the slice of life bollocks that they've been using for idents since 2006, in favour of simply handing their logo to various British artists and seeing what they can make of it. Specifically 52 artists, with a new ident every week. Unfortunately, they overlooked Kridoff, but the good news is that the scheme, which is called ITV Creates, was so successful it's carrying on into next year, so there's still time. A new ident every week in this day and age means 4 Christmas idents. Because Christmas idents begin on December the 1st now. That would appear to be the new tradition. In fact, this year they began on BBC One on the 30th of November, which is unprecedentedly early. Anticipation, it seems, was for decades with more patience. So the first week of December, week 49 overall, was handled by Faith Bebbington, famous for her huge sculptures of animals, like this reindeer with the ITV logo for antlers. Probably the best use I've seen of what I still think is quite an ugly logo. Then again, he'd be lucky to get about a fortnight's worth of work out of the previous ITV logo, so what do I know? Week 50 belonged to Hattie Newman, whose specialty is in making paper models of things, big and small, and particularly urban landscapes, like this one. A lovely exercise in scale and a monument to the patience and dedication of the people behind making it. That town would have been flattened within seconds if it had been me. Week 51's ident is courtesy of Melanie Tomlinson, another sculptural collagist whose work is full of little details. This is no exception. With the Create project, ITV have really brought the art, literally, back into the television ident, not to mention the interest, in a form that was looking increasingly moribund, and probably still is. This now-ending decade has been the decade of streaming. By the end of the next decade, television channels as we think of them right now might very well be a thing of the past, replaced by various rival cottage industries of streaming services, Disney+, Hulu, Netflix, BritBox if someone could program it to work properly, with hundreds or thousands or even millions of programs available at the touch of a button, old and new, and no need for schedules at all. Old habits die hard though. They were saying something similar 10 years ago. One thing's for sure, ITV doesn't really have any meaningful competition for the best Christmas ident this year. Although of all things, Channel 5 have a pretty good one this year. Look, they're actually using the channel logo in the ident, what a novelty. Radio Times cover is drawn by Robin Shaw for the 6th time in 8 years, and for the 5th time in a row. Shaw is one of the most in-demand illustrators and animators around, especially at this time of year, what with his spot-on impression of Raymond Briggs. He was the one who did it for Iron Brew. And this is his and the Radio Times' best work in a while, largely because it's not just a picture of Father Christmas and or a snowman grinning down the lens. And while there's no doubting Shaw's talent, maybe someone else could be given a chance next year? Or just a dominant colour other than blue? At the very least, give us a hint as to what might stop you calling it legendary every bloody year. Well, apart from the usual objection that people who describe themselves as legendary are obnoxious, swagging pricks by definition, that level of arrogance is becoming increasingly as the magazine's circulation drops and price rises. As I predicted last year, this year's double issue costs £5. And I would argue it's still worth it, but only just. The TV Times had a revamp this year, finally changing the logo after nearly 40 years, specifically separating the two words again. It calls itself Britain's best loved TV magazine, but it doesn't seem to be particularly well loved even by its own publishers, who've made it entirely subordinate to the altogether tackier What's on TV. A pamphlet-sized publication with a whiff of contempt for its own readers, and is best summed up by this collage of its previous 3 Christmas covers. That's the legendary double issue, incidentally, the actual Christmas and New Year listings. Anyway, TV Times this year goes again with just a picture of Father Christmas, but at least it's an original one. And a charming one too, drawn by the German illustrator Axel Scheffer, frequent collaborator with Julia Donaldson on the Gruffalo books, and most pertinently, The Squid and the Whale, which the BBC have adapted for Christmas afternoon. Incidentally, it's just as well they can put a BBC programme on the cover these days, because ITV's schedule this year is quite comfortably its, and very probably the worst, since 1993, when it fell on a Saturday and they just put out their usual Saturday schedule, including the chart show and movies, games and videos, for Christ's sake. And at least in 1993 they had a few good films. This year it's just wall-to-wall game shows, one of which ran out of steam at least 18 years ago. Oh, and a prime-time repeat of a one-off special 2 days earlier. I don't think I've ever seen a schedule so thoroughly outclassed by the ident before. A few other things to bring up. S4C, instead of returning to their Clockwork Santa's Grotto themes the past 2 years, have just gone with some Welsh people dancing, which is largely unremarkable, but I'm remarking upon it anyway.
Dathlu efo'r teulu a chadw'r traddodiadau yn fyw rwan ar S4C efo Beca a Becws.
In a new record for the oldest Christmas ident I've ever brought up, here's Rediffusions from 1967. As discovered, introducing the Boxing Day pilot episode of Finishing School for the Monty Python team, Do Not Adjust Your Set. By the end of the following year, of course, Rediffusion would be no more, and what was left of it would be part of Thames. Thanks to Stuart Kenny for bringing that to my attention. Thanks also to Glenn Rubin for, well, all sorts of things really, the only reward for which he requested was a mention on this programme, so here it is. And of course, thanks to Chris Oakley for making the titles, which can't possibly have been easy. And Michael Alexander for his continuing musical contributions. And everyone on Patreon for being the only source of income I'm ever likely to have. And to you for watching and listening. As we head into the 20s and the future we deserve, think only on this. The 90s were 30 years ago now. Partridge up your pear tree and all.